Hello, everybody. Today I have been challenged to make a League's relic tier list. So I'm going to be going through all of the different relics from all of the different previous leagues and kind of ranking them based on where I see them. And now, before you do anything, this was originally Scritic's idea. They've already made their video going ahead and ranking all of them, and they basically just wanted to see mine. So before you watch this video, go check out their channel first. Watch their video. They do a really great breakdown of all the relics, and I'm basically just stealing their idea. So give them some love first. And unlike Scritic's tier list, which was kind of based off their subjective experience, this one's going to be a more objective approach because it's based off my experience, and of course, I'm always correct. Starting off with Twisted League, this was League's one. I'm not really going to be ranking these relics just because, well, first off, I didn't play Twisted League, so I don't really have any personal experience with it. I would just basically be going off what I see from them. But more importantly, I think Twisted League was kind of like the first go at leagues, and so a lot of the relics just don't really work in a more modern format of leagues. Things like giving you more experience and skills just wouldn't be that appealing. And then you also had a couple weird things like combat relics on the same tier as skilling relics. So it's just really hard, I think, to rank Twisted Leagues because it is a little bit outdated. That being said, I wanted to talk about two that I think are really damn important, and that's Endless Endurance. This is the relic that would give you unlimited run energy, which has just become a mainstay part of the game. And this, for me, is just going straight into S tier. I think that even though this relic isn't the most absurdly powerful, it is so, I think, core to my fun and enjoyment of the game. I can imagine a Leagues without Last Recall. A Leagues without unlimited run energy would severely diminish my enjoyment, and so for that, that's going in S tier. I don't really see how I could ever pass up something like this, and if I did, it would just suck. And then the other one I wanted to talk about is Xeric's Focus. This is just because this would reduce your attack speed of your weapons by 1 tick, and it's kind of become the sigil of the ninja from Deadman mode. So I played around with it a bit. I know how fun it is. I know how important that was in Deadman mode. And I think that if we have a Leagues that isn't based around specific combat styles, so you don't have the Trailblazer style of significantly buffing a certain combat style, this is going to be a really, really strong relic. It's going to go A tier for me, especially if it's only restricted to 5 tick and higher weapons, because then it's bringing 5 tick weapons up to, I guess, 4 tick weapons, and that kind of balances out in a more general combat style. Hey everyone, for the next video, I'd like to do a review of a bunch of community speculation of what could be a new relic coming to Leagues 5. So if you have any ideas for, some new relics, could be some wacky thing that's never been seen before, post it down in the comments below or send it over in the Discord. Just make sure that I can see it, and I'll be taking some of the best, the ones that I like the most, that are creative and a little bit original, and I'll be kind of reviewing them in a new video that's coming soon. So thank you guys so much, and enjoy the rest of the video. Now, let's get into Leagues 2 Trailblazer, the first edition of this. And for pretty much all the relics moving forward, I'm going to be kind of ranking them based on the tiers that they were in. So skilling relics are going to be competing against other skilling relics. I'm not really going to compete them relative to something like combat relics, because I think most people would rather go for a combat relic than a skilling relic. And starting with Endless Harvest from Leagues 2, this would double your resources from fishing, woodcutting, and mining, and also automatically bank them. So I love this relic. I thought it was absolutely amazing. And it's just a great AFK tool. Moving on to Production Master, this one's probably going to go into I would say B tier for me, and this would automatically process your entire inventory whenever you are doing crafting, smithing, things like that. It was pretty beneficial, but I just feel the problem that I have with something like Production Master is you're kind of making fast bank standing skills a little bit faster. Well, a lot faster, but these are already pretty fast skills, whereas I think something like Endless Harvest is a little bit slower skills. So the extra experience and the extra resources you're getting from these slower skills, to me, is just more important than Production Master, where I could just bank stand for an hour anyways. And the last one in tier 1 was Skilling Prodigy, and this would increase your skills by 12. And I think this one's going to go into the D tier for me. I think it was a pretty cool relic idea, but the problem that I have with something like Skilling Relic, like this boost relic, is that At a certain point, the effect of it just isn't that useful anymore. It does kind of steamroll you or like speed you up into, harder content and get you, some tasks done faster. But like with leagues and how fast experience goes, at a certain point, you just don't really need something like this. And I think Endless Harvest and Production Master just keep providing you value well into like the end game portion of leagues where you're really doing some of the harder tasks. Moving on to tier 2, this was the transportation effects. Fairy's Flight would bring you to fairy rings and spirit trees. This one's going basically straight to D tier. I just don't think it's very good. There's just not that many good teleports that you could really want from this. And yeah, I don't know. This is just not a very strong relic. Same thing here with Eternal Jeweler, which is also going to go in D tier for me. It would give you unlimited charges of a lot of the main jewelry stuff, but kind of the problem that I have is once you can actually access those on your own, it just loses so much value because like yeah, it's nice in the early game to get around, but then you're not actually getting much value out of it once you've already been able to get a Ring of Dueling or to get, an Amulet of Glory. You're just not really like that pressed for these teleports. On the other hand, we have Last Recall, which to surprise of nobody is probably going to go straight into S tier for me. And that's because Last Recall is just such a game changer in leagues. The ability to teleport back to a previous location and to store a location just not only is it just so good for quality of life, but it also opens up so many cool new training methods. Completely broke the God Wars dungeon, and people were able to teleport back in there. And that led to kill count getting removed. Being able to teleport back into like a Barrows run and not have to do the maze section downstairs. Just so many things like that. Even like questing, it's so much fun with Last Recall that I love this thing. It's fun to use. It's fun to mess up and accidentally teleport somewhere else. And for me, S tier is really like I would have to be very, very pressed to find what relic I would rather have than one of these. And quite frankly, I don't know what relic could compete with Last Recall, and I would choose it. So I think this is just going S tier for me, pretty much no question. Next up, we've got the combat relics, the range, the melee, and the magic one for Leagues 2. And I think that these were just an excellent. This was the first time they had this like kind of cuts your attack speed in half. So I think all of these are absolutely great. I think I'm going to toss them all into like I guess the B tier. Honestly, I think I might just put them in the A tier. I think that this was such a cool relic when this first got announced. I mean, it was just really awesome. Actually, you know what? I'll put them in B tier for now because of something I'll talk about later, and that's the fact that it would cut your attack speed into like by 2, but it was very weird around like 5-tick weapons. So things like the scythe would make melee just feel kind of awkward. Same thing with things like magic. So magic felt pretty bad on this. I might even put magic here because of I'd probably put magic in C tier just because most magic stuff is 5-tick and 5-tick would get rounded to 3. So these guys are probably B. This one's probably C for me. Next up, we got Treasure Seeker. This was the clue scroll relic that would allow you to stack up clues. And I think this one's going to go straight into probably B tier. The thing about the clue scroll relic is it is very good, but it does make clues a lot more fun. But like, if you don't really want to be doing clues, and honestly, I don't really love doing clues in leagues, it's not like that helpful because it doesn't really help me with any content that's not clues. So is it fun? Yeah, but I would rather be doing almost anything but clues in leagues. I think if you like clues, then this is probably way higher. But for me personally, I'm going to throw it in B. Yeah, just pretty standard stuff. On the other hand, Unnatural Selection, which would let you pick your own Slayer tasks. This one's definitely going into A for me. Being able to pick your own Slayer task is really damn strong. You can really do any Slayer boss you want without having to go for the task. And in addition, it would also increase the amount of superiors you would get, so you had a better chance at that rare drop table. Overall, though, this is just a really powerful thing, and I loved it a lot. And it was kind of a no-brainer this leagues where I feel like getting the Slayer selection was just so much better. In the next tier are a couple of like skilling quality of life ones. Botanist would not only speed up farming, but the really cool part about this is that if you ever took a potion that would boost your stats, you would basically permanently get the benefits of that. And I think for that's actually going to go in A tier for me because having like permanently boosted stats is just a really cool concept. And I think it was fun that you didn't have to worry about, stats draining or things like that. But also the bonus effect of also helping with farming just made this really powerful for me. Next, you had the Infernal Gathering, and in Leagues 2, this would basically give you a version of sort of like the Infernal set of tools, which just wasn't that interesting. I don't think it was that great or significantly better than what you could get. So I think this one's gonna go in D tier for me. It's probably a high D tier, but it's not like it wasn't really that cool. And finally, there was Equilibrium, and basically what this means is every time you get experience, you would also gain additional experience equal to 10% of your total level. So let's say your total level was 2000. Every time you got an experience drop, you would get an extra 200. And I really love relics like this. I think they are so freaking cool because they open up new ways to train. They open up, new ways to think about the game. For example, training and controls that you would get, experience drops for attack, strength, defense, and hit points, things like that. I want to put this relic in like A, or even like I love this relic so much, but it's just not that good. Like I feel so bad because I love Equilibrium so much, but I just don't think it works. Like I think it needs something more, and I don't know what that something is, which makes me think that this relic just is bad. Like I almost want to put it in F tier because like I don't know what would get me to pick this relic. I really don't. It's just not that cool. It's just like more experience. It doesn't really change that much. Like it would have to be way stronger to the point where I just don't even think it would be fun. So I don't know. I think Equilibrium just needs to be looked at. It was like a cool idea, but I just don't think it worked, unfortunately. Now the final tier of combat relics was pretty impactful. I think the draining strikes was this would give you, not only would it give you life steal, but you could also have like prayer steal. So every time you did damage, you would also restore some of your prayer. And this is like an A tier one for me, just because I think that this makes the game so freaking cozy, where you got life steal, your prayer isn't really draining. You can just kind of go nuts and not have to worry about stuff. You could like AFK a lot of monsters too. So I really like the life steal like play style in leagues. And yeah, this one's like a really high A for me. The order doesn't super matter here. I'm just kind of putting them where I feel like they go. Now, exploding attacks would make basically all of your attacks deal like splash damage or AoE. They would also hit targets around them. And I just don't know why you would take this one. Like, I don't think there was any reason to take this one. It was just not very good. There's just not a lot of great options where you want to be hitting like multiple targets all at once. I don't think this one will ever really come back. I guess, if you had something like I could see some world where this comes back if you had like Catacombs of Karen, because there are a lot of like I guess like you can hit a lot of like monsters more than once when you're doing your Slayer tasks and stuff like that. Maybe you don't have like ancients, but you could do this with like a melee. But yeah, I don't think this one's very good at all. And it would have to be like a lot earlier. You'd have to get this pretty early to actually make some good value out of it. So it's pretty low tier for me. I don't really like this one very much. Moving along, we've probably got the strongest relic in Links 2, and that's a weapon specialist. This would allow you to use your special attacks at like 20% energy. So a lot of times you could spec out a monster 5 times, teleport back to your house, restore all your special attack, and you're good to go. But this thing is going to go into B tier for me. And that's because while I do like Weapon Master, it's fun for like an hour, and then it gets really boring to use. Like, I don't think I will ever play with Weapon Master in a Leagues format where I can't switch it, because it's kind of like a one-trick pony. Like, you use it, you spec out a monster, and then like that's kind of it. Like, there's not really much else to do. It's cool. You get some really cool clips. I love watching people like kill Vorkath in like 30 seconds. But as for actually playing it, nah, I don't think I would ever really go for this one unless you're like trying to go for that experience. But I just feel like it gets so much more boring compared to something like the Lifesteal Relic, where like that actually is kind of like a fun way that changes the game without really, like, I think, trivializing it, if that makes sense. Next, let's talk about Shattered Relics. Shattered Relics was a little bit weird because there were kind of like individual relic fragments that had their own pretty like mediocre effects, but then you would also have the set effects when you would combine these, and then actually creating the set effects together was kind of like the bigger pull of Shattered Relics that really would, I think, make for interesting combinations. As a result, there was actually a trade-off. So a lot of these I will be talking about as a trade-off. Like, you couldn't always use the effect if you were running it, because you would have to give up some of the other fragments that could make possibly other combinations. First up, Absolute Unit. This would make you take 50% less damage, but you would also reflect 100% of the damage that you did. It sounds super broken. It was pretty fun to use. However, it kind of had that same problem that I talked about with Weapon Master, where I think it did sort of like shift the game into a very weird thing where a lot of mobs you could just like bring a whole inventory of food and just eat them. Like you would just eat food nonstop and just reflect damage. That's how I did my God Wars dungeon. And I just don't think that something like that is really that good. So while I like Absolute Unit, I think that it's gonna go like low A, and that's just a caveat that like if it comes back, it needs some pretty big changes. I think 100% reflect is just way too much. 50% less damage is already really strong on its own, but the 100% reflect damage just I think it shifts the game in like a really unhealthy way that just is not that fun to play with after a while. And I don't think that they should bring this back. But it was pretty cool to use. Unfortunately, one of the things about Shattered Relics was that you could switch your relics out as you wished. And that meant that basically everybody had access to any relic combinations as you wanted. This made some relics, in my opinion, kind of become very insignificant just because if you wanted the set effect, you just put in the relics and then you would have it. So, for example, something like Alchemist, which would kind of do the same idea of Production Master, fully processing your inventory whenever you were doing any of those bank standing stuff. The problem is that anytime you're doing this, you would just add the relics and get it done. There's no real downside or no real like I guess like trade-off. So it kind of became like almost like a default relic. Like it might as well have just been a passive that everybody gets. And that's why unfortunately I think these are I'm probably just gonna have to put them in F tier just because of the Shattered Relics design. And I don't think that this works compared to something like Production Master, which is a like it was a hard trade-off that you had to do, and that made it like a more interesting choice. Same thing goes for Endless Knowledge, which would allow you to change spell books. Pretty much no reason to like. There was very reason to ever like I guess not use this because you would just go to a bank, switch your spell book, switch the relics back. It just kind of I don't know. It just wasn't very interesting because of that. And again, same thing goes with the Endless Harvest version. It's just you would always use this. The automatic banking of resources, you would just always use this when you were using your gathering stuff. The Trailblazer one, anytime you need to teleport, you would use it, but it was so bad that you just I don't think you ever use this anyway. And the Skilling Prodigy one too. Like if you needed the boost, you just equipped it, use the effect, swap back. And these kind of relic designs, I think this is why a lot of people I think didn't like Shattered Relics is because swapping to them to get the effect and then swapping out just isn't really as fun as sort of the hard decisions. And that should probably have been I think like they should have thought about that when they made these. That being said, that's not true for all the Shattered Relics one, especially the combat one, since you did have some kind of trade-off. The combat styles would all give you a 60% chance at doing another hit, and I think that these are all just great. I would put them in kind of B tier. Very similar to the combat relics of Leagues 2. They were pretty important. But I think the fact that it was a chance to double hit made it so that every single weapon was, I guess, like pretty equally balanced. You were getting that huge spike in your damage bonus, which I think was especially interesting when you were doing something like raids, having to choose which one of these you wanted to put into your build versus a more general style like Absolute Unit. And I think it worked really well in Shattered Relics. It didn't have that same issue of Leagues 2 where 5-tick weapons just weren't very good, and so you couldn't use something like the Scythe. The percent chance at dealing a double attack made it so that pretty much all weapons would kind of benefit from it equally, and I thought that was a really cool way. So they did a very good job, I think, with these. I'd probably put these like very almost like high B tier because I think that this was one of my favorite versions of these combat relics and having to think about how you wanted to include them in your build. Which, by the way, that was the most fun. That was kind of the most fun part of Shattered Relics for me, was coming up with my own setups of the 7 relic fragments to get the set effects. I could definitely understand if you just Googled them and just copy pasted what everybody else was doing or what your favorite streamer was doing. Shattered Relics probably wasn't as fun because you didn't get that experimental, I guess, aspect of the game to yourself. Oh, this is another Production Master style one. I think this is the one for like crafting, but it's just like this alchemist one where it would just instantly process your inventory. Again, just really boring, not really interesting when you don't have any trade-off for it. Moving on, Dragon's Touch. This was the lifesteal relic of Shattered Relics, and I would put this one probably in low A. I loved trying to include this in my build because I love the lifesteal stuff, and I think it's really really fun. You didn't get the prayer steal that uh, Leagues 2 had, but I still think that trying to include the extra lifesteal in your Shattered Relics build without giving up like a combat relic or without giving up absolute unit was a lot of fun. And there's definitely like any fight where there's chip damage, that lifesteal part just allows you to go for almost infinite amounts of trips. So I love lifesteal relics, and I will always, defend them. Next, fast metabolism. This would increase your hit points regeneration by 4 times. And I think this one's going in D tier for me. It's just not really that impactful. 4 times regeneration of your hit points, it's just not that cool. Like, it doesn't really do that much. That being said, in the last Deadman mode, I think people did start kind of experimenting more. And the thing about these like hit point regeneration effects is when you do stack up enough of them, you can really start to get to like pretty ridiculous levels of restoration. So if something like this comes back, there is a world where it gets a lot better by just giving you insanely high passive health restoration. It's just that for me personally, I would still rather go for a more powerful lifesteal relic than one that just gives you passive health regeneration, because it's just not as fun, I think, to just get it passively instead of having to actually like fight back and get that by doing damage to monsters. Next, Knife's Edge. This would allow you to deal more damage based on how much hit points you're missing. So think something like Darok's, lower hit points, the more damage you're doing. And next to lifesteal, this is legitimately my favorite thing ever. I love the trade-off of doing more damage at low hit points because it makes leagues so much fun when you're doing like almost 2 times damage when you're at like camping like 10 HP or something like that. And it's really fun to see how many monsters you can actually start going down to 1 hit points. Like I remember doing Zulrah, and typically you don't do Zulrah at 1 hit points because that's insane, but with all of the league's benefits, you could almost like kill Zulrah before a single point of like dangerous damage would come out. And it really did put the game on a knife's edge, and I think that is so fun, and it really changes up the game in such a fun way where you can do these bosses at like insane speeds with so much damage. But if you make a single mistake, if you mess up once, you take 1 point of avoidable damage, then like you're just dead basically. And also finding out like where you could kind of hover. So like let's say a monster could do like 30 hit points. It's like, okay, now I gotta hover like 32 hit points, something like that. I just think Knife's Edge is so cool. I love anything where you do more damage the lower hit points you have. It's a really fun effect. Finally, last recall, which was obviously it's just last recall, but I think Shattered Relics did this exceptionally well by having it tied to certain relic fragments. So if you wanted to include this in your setup, you would have to trade off other things, and that made it so that there was actually some decision to make. For example, God Wars, you would absolutely use this, but a lot of other bosses you would just forsake it for more damage. And I think overall that was a pretty good way of doing it. I think this to me is like the best Shattered Relics set effect, because of how well it used the Shattered Relics format of making you, I guess, forced to do trade-offs for like quality of life stuff. That being said, I think Leagues 4 has done Last Recall best by just giving it to everybody and then giving it a cooldown based off of your total levels. So I'm still gonna put this one in S tier because I do think it's really good, but I think Leagues 4 did it best. So yeah, if it ever comes back, Last Recall will almost always be picked, but I don't think Last Recall should ever be a relic again, basically, because it's just way too strong. Like, it's just way too strong. Finally, let's talk about Leagues 4, the most recent one, and I pretty much got to play around with every one of these relics, so this is the one I feel the most confident talking about. First up, Endless Harvest. I'm putting this one straight up in A tier. I think Endless Harvest is an amazing relic. It allows you to do the slowest skills in the game so much faster, allows you to get ahead of people in the early part where these gathering skills are, pretty easy to train and stuff like that. And the biggest thing that I like about it is that it does open up some really nice AFK options where you could just go fishing Karambwans for I'm not joking. You can go fishing for 25 minutes while you go to the store or go eat your dinner. And I like having an AFK option like that doesn't really demand my time as much. Like doing some mining or some wood cutting, having to go back and stuff like that, especially if Banker's Note doesn't come back, because I think that the ability to kind of note all your stuff was a sort of relative nerf to Endless Harvest. So I do think that if we get another leagues with Endless Harvest without Banker's Note, then the ability to put everything in your bank is a huge benefit. Same thing with Last Recall. Again, basically anything that allows you to bank your stuff without you having to do that travel, that hurts Endless Harvest. So if those don't exist, then Endless Harvest is like way better. But for me, I am an Endless Harvest defender till the day I die. Harvest King for life, and I am throwing it into the A tier. Now, Production Prodigy, this actually combined the League's 2 Production Master with Skilling Prodigy, so you're getting both of them. And I still think that this one ends up in B tier. It's good. It's fun to use, but it's just like it's not really saving you that much stress. And that's like the big thing for me. It's just not saving you that much effort compared to Endless Harvest, which is giving you 3 times experience on some of the slower skills. This is just making bank standing skills, which are already really fast. You're getting like insane experience rates. It's just making that much faster. So yeah, you can get level 99 cooking in like, I don't know, like 20 minutes or something like that. But like you can get level 99 cooking anyways in like an hour. So I don't really think Production Master's all that good, even with the Skilling Prodigy benefits. And yeah, they would have to just change something. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of taking fast stuff and making it even faster. I would rather make the slow stuff fast. Speaking of, we should probably talk about the next one, which is Trickster. And Trickster was probably the coolest relic, I think, to come out of Leagues 4. What this would do was it would automatically give you agility experience while you were running. And in addition, you could not fail agility courses. You could not fail pickpocket. You would also continue to pickpocket. So you could basically AFK pickpocket. And you couldn't fail hunter. And I think fire making was like you would do 9 at once, basically. So Trickster was really damn cool. And I think a lot of people really loved it just because it basically passively solved agility, which is like really strong for a lot of people, not having to do any agility at all. In addition, just like Endless Harvest, I would say the option of having like an AFK pickpocketing makes it pretty damn good. So for me, I'm going to go ahead and put Trickster in very top of A tier. And that's because I think Trickster is really good. And for most people, this is going to be an amazing relic. However, I think it does depend a little bit on your regions and kind of what you like to do. Because if you're picking regions that have a lot of agility tasks anyway, or a lot of, pickpocketing stuff anyway, for example, if you're going to Zaya and one of your tasks is to like go get 100 artifacts, you're going to be getting a lot of thieving experience anyways, and you're going to be getting a lot of agility experience from doing, monkey laps or doing the wilderness like laps, things like that. Like any region that has tasks related to those, you're kind of already getting that by doing it. So does it really matter as much if you're solving those if you just end up doing it anyways? I don't know. And that's to me why I think Trickster is not like the highest value ever. I will say though that the reason why it's still so high for me is because for most people, you just don't need to worry about those tasks unless you're going for like an obscene amount of points, like you're going for higher than Dragon. Like you can just not do the agility tasks. It's not that bad. So yeah, Trickster is insane to me, but I don't think it's quite as insane as like I don't think it gets to a level of broken where I think it like devalues or invalidates the other tier 1 relics, basically. Like I could very easily see a world where you would still pick these over Trickster. Now, with making Last Recall default, the tier 2 transportation relics were a lot more interesting in Trailblazer, or in Leagues 4. Fairy Flight also got the addition of Tool Leprechauns, and I think that makes it like a really good teleportation relic, because that is a lot of new teleports to get around. I also loved how fun it was to relearn the game, sort of, and think about where all the Tool Leprechauns were. It was very strange going back to the main game, and now you don't have all those teleports in your head. I remember seeing discussion of people saying like, oh, what's the fastest way to get to here? It's like this Tool Leprechaun that they didn't know about. So things like that I just think were it was a cool way to change the game. Like, the Fairy Flight was so damn cool by adding in the two leprechauns. Yeah, what a really cool way to just make this like an awesome relic. I think that what they really need to do for relics, and my favorite part about leagues, is when relics give you a new effect that's not in the game, and that to me is a big reason why Globetrotter is a little bit lower at C. I don't think Globetrotter was bad. It would give you all of the like jewelry teleports as well as all the spellbook teleports. But like you can already use most of the spellbook teleports and most of the jewelry teleports. You can't teleport to two leprechauns, and that to me is why I think Fairy Flight is so much higher because it is something new. It's something I guess fun to learn, something to change your playstyle, and that is just like that's just exceptional. So yeah, good stuff to Fairy Flight. I think it's just awesome. Oh boy, this one's hard. We got Banker's Note and Fire Sale. Um, so here's what I'm gonna say. All right, I think that Banker's Note is undeniably an S tier relic. I think it is so insane how much this thing changes the game. Banker's Note would allow you to note and unnote items in your inventory, and there's just so many different things that, like, again, it's such a innovative new way of playing, I think, RuneScape. And rune crafting is fast. You get to like whenever you're gathering or skilling, you can convert all that to notes, so you don't need to bank as much. But the real thing that I thought was so cool about Banker's Note was how much it actually affected PVM as well, and how much earlier you could get into raids and bosses because you could bring yourself like 200 noted sharks and then just like chew your way through raid bosses, even if they were like absolutely destroying your health. Like, as long as you just kept eating and you just kept unnoting, yeah, this thing was just so cool. So yeah, Baker's Note, again, it's just a relic that I feel like if you're ever given this as an option, the other option would have to be insanely good to choose. On the other hand, Fire Sale, this would allow you to essentially buy everything you wanted from shops that costed coins. And I mean, this thing was insane. I think this thing sounded really, really insane when you got it, because it did, just like Banker's Note, it did open up a couple of like interesting new training methods. For example, like buying from the construction shop to get like ridiculous construction experience rates. It definitely made the early game, I think, chore of getting cash a lot easier. But unlike Banker's Note, which still had so much value throughout leagues, I think that this thing sort of devalues as you get more into the game because you can kind of solve everything with cash anyways. It's not as important. So very good for the early game. It's a lot of fun to use, and I think a lot of people would still prefer this to Banker's Note. But for me, the most important thing is the fact that while Fire Sale does get you through the early part of leagues faster, Banker's Note jumping you into early PVM faster is ultimately what makes this like a much, much, much better relic for me. And it's like the gift that keeps on giving. You never stop loving Banker's Note. You never stop regretting it. So Banker's Note S tier for me. Fire Sale probably sitting in C. It's still really good, just not as, I guess, interesting. Now we've got the combat styles for Leagues 4. The most important change here is that they would all take 5-tick weapons down to 2-tick, which made things like the Dragon Longsword a lot better. Also, things such as like Ancients now were just really, really strong. Now for these, it's pretty tough to rate, and like I kind of want to just put them all sort of in like the same category. But I think for me, I'm probably gonna put these like, I almost want to say like ranged, melee, and I think they're just all going to be A's, honestly, because they're just all good. They're just all good, honestly. So I think this is how I'm going to go. The biggest thing that I think that made them all like really interesting was the fact that ranged also had an increased chance of bolt procs, so crossbows just became insanely good. Even like a rune crossbow would just make range totally fine. Melee saw a lot of really cool weapons, like again the Dragon Longsword, the Leaf Bladed Battle Axe. The Fang was insanely good, and then magic. You had Ancients and the Shadow, which were baseline 5-tick, and I think that because of how it played with 5-tick weapons, I think all of them were really, really fun. This was probably like the most balanced, I guess, choice I've ever seen in leagues, and yeah, I think all three of them were great. Now, next up, we've got Bloodthirsty. This was the Slayer relic of Leagues 4. Here's the thing, though. It did not let you pick your own Slayer tasks. And in addition to that, everybody already got like really high Slayer points when they were completing it. So really the main thing that this did was that there was a chance to spawn a bloodthirsty mob that would have access to a rare drop table. And like, was it good? Yeah, but it just didn't feel leagues enough. Like to me it didn't feel like it was changing the game enough, and that's why it's going to go C tier for me. I did play it, I did like it. I honestly think it was still like fine. I just felt kind of bored after a while of using it, and I was like, man, I kind of wish I had gotten some of the other stuff that had more of an impact. Infernal Gathering was so much better this leagues compared to leagues 2, because not only did you get the infernal weapons, but they were also they would also go faster than like their main game counterpart, and this allowed you to essentially be able to like tick manipulate when you were like mining, fishing, or woodcutting, without having to actually do the tick manipulation. And I honestly think Infernal Gathering is, I think it's good. I think it's probably B tier. It's like a high. I think this is a high B tier. I think this one was really good. Um, Especially combined with Endless Harvest. I mean, I was doing some really fun stuff. Like one cycle Temperos was really cool. Being able to just sit and mine like iron rocks for like hours and just getting steel bars deposited to my bank. Like, yeah, I don't know. I think combined with Endless Harvest, this thing was really good. But even on its own, I still think Infernal Gathering was like a really good relic. I feel like a lot of people just didn't think about this one because the Leagues 2 version wasn't very appealing. But having the faster tools is really good. And again, mining, woodcutting, and fishing are already the 3 slowest skills, so speeding that up does make a pretty big difference. Now let's talk about Treasure Seeker. Honestly, it's pretty much exactly where it is. Like, it's good if you like doing clues. It's a lot of fun. I would even say this one's worse just because you baseline were getting stackable clues anyways. So if you like doing clues, it's going to be fun for you. It's good. There are a lot of points from clues, but you could just not do the clues. And again, if you're not going for insanely high points, like, you don't have to do all the clues anyways. So I don't really love the clue one. I'm glad it exists for people that like doing clues, but I'm somebody who doesn't like doing clues, so it's always going to be pretty mid for me. Moving on to the next tier, we've got Equilibrium coming back. Now they did change this so that instead of getting 10% of your total level every time you get an experience drop, now it would be 20%. But it just wasn't enough. I'm sorry. I love Equilibrium so much. I want this to be good, but it's just not good. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to save Equilibrium, but I don't think this one's very good. Okay, so Farmer's Fortune. This would automatically grow anything that you planted. And I think it also had a chance of giving you the seed back. So it made seeds like really cool because you would automatically get the resource and you would get just a ton of experience. And I think for me, I think I'm gonna go ahead and put this one in like, I don't want to put it in like the bottom of A tier because I did really, really like it. And I think it was a pretty good relic. But the only issue that I had with Farmer's Fortune is the fact that it's kind of like you're getting all the value like really fast in one spurt, I guess. So like, it's really cool to use, but compared to some of these other relics that like you're just always getting the value from it, like, it's just like, I don't know. It sounds kind of weird to say, but it just feels like Farmer's Fortune. It's like you're getting all of the effects done in like 2 minutes or like 5 minutes. You just plant all your seeds, get all the experience, and it's like it's done. And yeah, I don't know. Like, it's strong, but I feel like I don't know if I like relics that are very like one use only, and they stop being as valuable. And that's why I think like Ruinous Powers to be like, I think this one is definitely going in like high A tier, like really, really high A tier. Ruinous Powers would give you access to the, like, I guess, Ruinous Spellbook, or like the Ancient Spellbook, or that was a prayer book, sorry, the Ancient Prayer Book. And this had a lot of really cool things. First off, you could use this to not have to get certain regions, but you could still get the prayer. So, for example, if you didn't want to do Kandarin, but you were going for a melee route and you wanted Piety, you could pick Ruinous Powers instead and get the, like, essentially like the stronger Piety from this prayer book. And that was really, really, really cool. I also just love how I think I love like new content being added to leagues. That's like a really cool idea. And the Ruinous Prayer Book did not make it into like the main game with Desert Treasure 2. So adding that to leagues was a really cool way to get to play around with it. And I think that like giving people the option to still get those prayers without being tied to the regions is really good. So yeah, Ruinous Powers, definitely an A tier for me. Now we've got the last 6. These are all really powerful combat relics. And I'm going to go ahead and start with Berserker. And I'm throwing this one also into the S tier. This had a basically a two-part effect where first off you were dealing more damage the more or the less hit points you had, so kind of like the Darox effect, but you were also guaranteed to hit your max hit if the NPC was at full health. That's crazy. You're getting your max hit, and that's a lot of damage. But with ranged and with magic, you could also sometimes get 2 or even 3 max hits because there was like a cast time delay. So a lot of times with magic, I was doing 3 max hits to open up every single fight. That was insanely broken. It did so much damage, and it was really, really fun to use. Not to mention, you're camping, low health the whole time. Like there, it's a really cool relic. Like it was so cool to use. It was really, really powerful. It combined pretty much everything I love. So I think it goes straight into S tier for me. Next, we got Soul Stealer, which was sort of like the lifesteal version. And this would kind of just restore some life. And honestly, for me, I think this one's going to go in C. I usually am a huge fan of these lifesteal ones, but I think that just relative to how strong the combat relics were in this tier, it doesn't really stack up as much anymore. It's still pretty cool to use. It's still pretty chill, but it just, again, it's just. I think combat relics have just gotten more crazy. So yeah, and of course, going on to Weapon Master, this was I think very similar to Weapon Master from Leagues 2. It was pretty strong to use, but it had that same kind of problem of like once you've used it, it's just not as fun anymore. The kind of new caveat here was the fact that after you used your special attack, you could use your life instead, which was, I think, a more interesting version to like spec a couple times, eat food to restore health, and then you have more spec. I just don't think it was as interesting as something like Berserker was. Just specking like over and over and over again, I think it just gets kind of boring. Also, I think I'm going to move these Shattered Relic ones down a bit. I think in hindsight, they're actually just not that interesting outside of like very few use cases. I just realized that these are just not as interesting in my opinion because you're just if you're doing melee, you just take the melee one. So I think I'm going to put them down for the Shattered Relic. Okay, and we got the last 3 here. First off, Guardian. This was the like really strong thrall that would do a lot of damage. For me, I'm putting this one into the D tier. And that's because I think that ultimately this was just passive damage, and that's a pretty boring relic design. The strength of this relic is entirely determined just based on how strong it was. If it did 2 times more damage, it would probably be an S tier relic. If it did half as much damage, nobody would ever pick it. But this is why I don't like passive damage relics that just don't really do that much. They just add bonus damage. So yeah, I'm just not a really huge fan of the Guardian. It's cool. I think it's like a really cool idea. I love using it, but I think that relics should feel new and they should feel a little bit more fresh. And having a little guy that shoots damage just isn't that for me. Especially compared to something like Executioner, which was exactly that. Executioner will allow you to kill monsters that were under the 20% HP threshold. And yeah, this thing is insane for things like raids. I think you could use it even on like Inferno or something like that. It allowed you to like kill necks at 20%. Anything that has a huge amount of HP or anything that has like an enrage phase at low health, the ability to skip that is just so freaking good. And it's such a new such a new thing that I don't think I would have even guessed something like this in advance. And that's why Executioner to me is definitely an A tier, probably a really high A tier. The only thing that would kind of keep it a little bit lower is the fact that it was a little bit like janky to use. I almost wish that it would just automatically execute when things got to 20% HP, because having to like equip it is just a level of like jank that I didn't really like playing with as much. But I could definitely see the appeal for a lot of people. And finally, you got Undying Retribution, and this one's also going to go in S tier for me. I think that a cheat death, the ability to die and come back to life, is insane for leagues. It is such a unique way of playing the game, and it's a very kind of standard of MMOs to have some kind of cheat death. So adding this to leagues was really cool to get that sense of the game. I loved how cozy it made raids and whatnot. The fact that you could die, but you wouldn't throw away like 20 minutes in a raid because you could just come back to life. So you can make a mistake here or there. I really like the fact that you could also do a little bit more damage with it. So if you wanted to do that, you could go for the damage aspect, but then you would give up the fact that now you can't die anymore. It was also really cool to use as like a full health, full prayer restore in situations where you didn't want to use your resources as much. And then it also combined so well with Berserker, where like now you could camp 1 health, and if you did make a mistake, that's okay. You just now you can't, I guess, milk Berserker as much. So overall, I think Undying Retribution was just the coolest relic of that tier, and it was the one that I think almost everybody could have a ton of fun with in a really unique way. So I'm very, very big fan of this one. And that's it, guys. That is all the relics. I think I'm just covering a couple of these Shattered Relic ones here, so hopefully you guys can see them. But that's pretty much it. Hopefully you don't disagree with these too much. Let me know what you agree with. Let me know what you disagree with, and I will see you guys in the next video.